Welcome into this week's edition of the Research Corner. I'm Tony Mulvey, Senior Research Analyst here at FreightWaves. Joined on the phone by Kevin Hill, Head of Research. Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here on a Tuesday morning, Tony.
Awesome. Yeah. So we released a white paper talking about drop trailer detention, and maybe you could give a little background on what this survey was about, what we were trying to find out, and some of those results.
Yeah, so we're talking about trailer drop and hook services, and really, what are the terms of those arrangements? What is the average term, or term, I should say, on those agreements? You know, how much detention time do large trucking companies and small trucking companies as well give to their customers before they start charging detention? And we did this survey. If we throw up the chart here, we can see that about 40% or so are fleets with 500 or more trucks. And if you add in 100 or more trucks, which I consider large fleets, you're looking about half the survey was about that. And it's really about their terms when they are in trailer programs and dropping and hooking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what stood out to me was just the size of these programs. I mean, you look at, I think it's actually about 75% of that 100 plus mark. So, I mean, we're talking about massive trailer pools. And really, I think what's interesting is a majority of it was dry van. I mean, we'll pull up a chart and kind of show. I mean, about 65% of the respondents to the survey were dry van. But then you also had about 25% reefer and 10% open deck. So, I mean, you're talking, it's kind of a broad space. And I know we talk about, I was going to say, when we talk about the overall market, I mean, it's kind of how it breaks down itself.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's generally the rule of thumb of the trailers out there. Depending on what you're looking at, it's between 65, 75% of dry van, or it breaks down to that, right? You take dry vans, about half of that is reefer, or you take the reefer number, it's about half of dry van. Take the flatbed number, it's about half of the reefer population out there, and it breaks down to about what we see here in the survey.
Yeah, and so I mean this part wasn't a surprise. I think the big surprise was how big the fleets were. But we'll pull up. I mean, we'll start getting into some of these results, and you start looking at detention times, and we talk about it a lot. And it's different when it's drop and hook as opposed to a live load, unload, things like that. But I mean, we're looking at 85% of respondents reporting that their detention to average free time on a trailer is between that 1 to 3 days. I mean, two days was really the most popular, about 45%. But I don't think anything really surprised me seeing that time frame. But it's just interesting how many people are in that 1 to 3 day range.
Yeah, it seems to be the standard industry average here is 1 to 3 days, and kind of what I thought of before we went into the survey, and it kind of confirms that 2 days, is at that normal time. And if you run as a freight broker, especially, and had drop and hook programs with very large carriers, they get very antsy after a couple of days. That trailer is a very productive asset. It needs to be turning. It needs to fit within their schedule of when drivers are going to be there. So, if that trailer is going to drop, or it's going to sit around for a week or 2 weeks, or even 4 or 5 days, that becomes a problem.
Yeah, for sure. And again, another interesting thing that we saw, I mean, I think the price of that detention rate after that free time was a little interesting to me, because, I mean, we'll pull up the results here. You'll see average daily detention rate after that free time is right around $62. But what you see, so if going back to, I guess, early middle school math, that range, median, mode, and mean, you look at the mode, so that number that pops up the most across the survey at 50, right? And I think that's kind of what stood out to me. You look at the average, it being 62, and then you see the mode there at 50. I think that's what stood out to me.
Yeah, $50 seems to be the catch-all for accessorials in trucking in a lot of ways, right? So If you're talking about detention, it's going to be around $25 to $50. And there's no hard and fast rule, and it's a very fragmented industry. You have tarping charges on the flatbed side are going to be about the same, lumper charges. So while it's very fragmented, a lot of players out there, a lot of what you would think there'd be a range of charges, it always kind of, for some reason, it gravitates to $50 for just about anything. You're going to talk $50, and it shows up in this detention survey for trailer drop services as well.
Yeah, we'll move a couple charts ahead and get to kind of the primary drivers of daily detention. So I don't think this was really a surprise. We asked what those primary drivers were, and really it'll be load volume, customer profitability, and line haul rates. And those were, I don't think, really a surprise to me, seeing those were the top three answers. But I mean, volume, they want to keep those trailers moving, that utilization high.
Yeah. And if you take volume and profitability, right, they're two sides of the same coin, and you can have more volume and maybe less per unit profitability, or less volume and more per unit or per load profitability, and it all balances out in the end because price times volume equals revenue.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Kevin, on this edition of the Research Corner. We'll be sure to check in with you again next week, or a little later this week for this week's On the Spot, and then again next week for Research Corner. But right now, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more FreightWaves Now.